Hi, everybody. While it's still Martin Luther Day, I have a few things I'd like to weigh in on having to do with the IHOP and the recent scandals and accusations around IHOPKC and Pastor Mike Bickle. Um, this just hit the news this week, but it's been something brewing for a long time. And when something happens with major names in the USA, I'm sure that my regular viewers find it a little strange that I'm here in my rebel hideout in Mexico. I don't cross back over to the USA. I'm in front of my Mexico map and then breaking down all the details. Listen, I don't want to sling mud. I do have some enemies out there and some scores that need to be settled, and a lot of truths that I've observed and investigated over the years that need to be told. I'm just interested in the truth. And as far as the hop, or any Christian work that crashes and burns, there's two ways that can be. One, it can be conceived in iniquity. I'm going to put my light on here so you can see me better. One is it can be conceived in iniquity. And there are works like that were never right, that were from the very beginning were flawed. But then there's the other side. There are real revivals, and anytime there's a spark of revival, the devil worshippers and the witches show up immediately to infiltrate it, to break into it, to discredit it, to derail it, to cause as much chaos as they can. And they want for every legitimate move of God to go down in flames. This is their goal. And I mean, they show up immediately. The moment you open the doors, sometimes before you open the doors, there's people just with a call on their life or that have a heritage in God. And the enemy has pursued them for years. And so when we talk about what was going wrong at IHOP, because there was some stuff seriously going wrong, and how long it's been going wrong, I don't want to confuse the fact that early on, like in the opening year, the late 90s and the opening years of the 2000s, there was some action at the hop, and God was really moving there. You know, there are other movements that came before it. The hop was the latest and the most illustrious and the most fabulously successful out of a series of prayer movements. And if you look at the opening slide of this video, it's me sitting on the hood of my diesel Mercedes about, 2009, in the parking lot at Red Bridge Road, there at the hop. So I know a lot about the hop. I've had a lot of friends at the hop. I've checked in on it numerous times. Clayt Sonmore, a mentor of mine, told me to go there and tell Mike Bickle to shut it down. That was around this time, 2010 or 2011, because it had already gotten off the rails. Here's something else, and I've spoken about this in other messages, but for new viewers, the person that's sitting on the hood with me is Dennis Tarpon, the real great-grandfather of the 24-hour House of Prayer movement. He opened the first one of our era, of this time in the early 80s in Davenport, Iowa, right in the drug-addled crime district. He opened a house of prayer. It was 24 hours. I'm going to say it was beyond 1985 because they had a CD changer. So it was right then in the mid to late 80s. He built it in a little apartment. It was a beautiful thing. There were angelic visitations. There were divine healings. And, when the train wreck happens, this is what the enemy would like to do, is to discredit all of that. Discredit the prophetic. You know, hanging out with Torben Sondergaard in his worldwide movement, he had a real bad attitude about the prophetic movement. Not that there couldn't be prophecies, not that there aren't prophets, not that people don't hear from God, but that there was this monstrosity of a prophetic movement that was out there that he knew would, the adherents of it would come around and try to infect what he was doing. And sure enough, he was right about that. At the same time, he was a little bit jaded. And this is what we have to watch out for. It's just getting jaded and spaded. Made myself a little ginger tea. I put an actual chunk of ginger in it when my throat was sore. It was almost too much to bear. So this is just a little tea and honey. Where to begin? At the hop. You know, there's a scripture, I think it's in 3 John, where the apostle says that he has no greater joy than to see his children walking in truth. And it's very difficult when you're building Christian works to come back later and find anything left of it. You know, there's a town up the road here where I confronted witches and devils, and it was a horrific battle. It was terrible. I lost a lot of things in that battle. But you know what? 2 sisters came, so this is 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. A couple sisters came up from that town, and they said, you know, almost that whole town is Christian now. And I don't think that they even know that I was the one who drew the short straw. All the pastors that the boss had discipled, none of them went and locked horns with those principalities. It was me. I did it, and at great personal cost. And to see that the whole town, you know, there is no dominion of darkness in that place anymore. And let me tell you, it was bad. It was bad back then. I don't know. Maybe someday you'll get me to chat about that, but I'm not really here to talk about me other than some things that I've observed. So it was 2 disciples of Brother Dennis Tarpon who fell in love at his prayer meeting, that he cast a devil out of the pastor's daughter, and then the 2 of them went to Kansas City, started hanging out with Mike Bickle, going to his church, and put this idea in his head. Hey, you know, if we get together and pray around the clock, it's just amazing what God does when people commit to do that. It was a new idea at the time. Now it's been all around the world, and a lot of illustrious prayer movements have already reached their apogee and are in decline, waiting for a new wave and a new thing. But it was something that really changed the landscape of 20th and 21st century Christianity. Something else is the bridal paradigm. I believe it's Ephesians where the believer's relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ is equated to a marriage. Also in Hebrews. And so when we look at the Song of Solomon, it should not be shocking that that people look at that and see this as Christ in the church. Of course, that can lead down this road to sexualization. You know what? I got a ride back from deep in Mexico from a missionary that was a lot older than I, and he told me a lot of things just in that drive that have stuck with me even to this day. I don't even remember his name right now. I remember where he lived in Tulsa. I'd stop in and visit him every once in a while for some years. Anyway, one thing he told me was it was a big deal at that time to have a flag team and have the doncellas, you know, the young girls of the church, to get nice outfits and to get up and dance and to wave flags. And here's what that guy said. Like, everybody was doing it. Here's what that guy said. He looked at me like right in the eye, and he said, I've noticed that every place that happens, eventually there's sexual sin. Boom. And it was like, all right, I took that under advisement. And sure enough, a lot of places that did that did wind up in sexual sin. So, there's a point where we look to some elders to bring us some wisdom and experience where we don't fall into the same traps and pitfalls. So the whole bridal paradigm of the Song of Solomon, people can run and make that sexual. They can make that erotic. That's a whole other kind of love. There is not supposed to be any degradation of the masculinity of the Christian believer, especially, for men. There's definitely not supposed to be any degradation of that when we see the Song of Solomon in the bridal paradigm. Nevertheless, this is one of the things that everybody's going to be laughing at now. And I'm going to bring up a lot of articles. There are a lot of article links in the description for this video. And I'm going to talk about the event after which everybody should have known. Everybody should have known that this movement had gone off the rails. And I'm talking more than 10 years ago. More than 10 years ago. Leonard Ravenhill and William Branham were the two primary mentors of Brother Clayton Sonmore. And Brother Clayton Sonmore told me and Dennis, we were sitting in his living room, and he said, talking about Mike Bickle, and he said, Leonard Ravenhill was invited to give their commencement at the big New Year's ceremony. So this is right around the same time, 2008, 9, 10. Leonard Ravenhill had given the commencement the year before, or given the preached at their New Year's ceremony at IHOPKC. And then Mike Bickle invited him to come back the next year. And he said he wouldn't come. So Mike Bickle called Clayton Sonmore and said, Clay, would you please call Leonard Ravenhill and ask him, plead with him to come, because the anointing on his life was so prolific. This is a danger sign when people are looking to other people to make something happen in God. Why did they want to pull him in when they weren't going to take his advice? So Brother Clayton called Ravenhill and said, hey, Mike Bickle really wants you to come to preach at New Year's at the Hop. And Leonard Ravenhill said, Brother Clayton, I'm not at liberty to come. He said that the Lord had pulled his chain and would not remotely let him come because they were already off the rails and they were not going to heed his advice. So before I get into the main event, Martin Luther Day, where now, Halloween too, right? 31st of October. This is a very high day for the devil worshippers, and they go out and they cause chaos and they work all their. It's not just toys and games. There is serious witchcraft and diabolical rituals that happen at this time of year against Christian works. And those of us that are serious about the things of God, a lot of times put ourselves in prayer and fasting at these times of year because we know the devil's afoot. I'm watching my perimeter because the devil is afoot. But October the 31st is also the day that Martin Luther nailed to the door of the Wittenberg Chapel in Germany in 1517 his 95 Theses, really his accusations against Romanism, against the clergy, the popes of the world that were ruling the world at that time. And Martin Luther had come up in that system, And he led this great movement to come out of it. Brother Clay told me that the Roman Church, in some of their secret estimates that they do not admit publicly, he said, having attended secret meetings at South Bend, Indiana, and other places. You know, you can look up Brother Clay's books. That particular experience is in his book called None Dare Call It Deception, which is his second book after the first one, called Beyond Pentecost. So you're welcome to look around. If you can find a copy of that, it'll blow your mind. He said that there were real figures, that the Catholic Church lost 1/3 of their clergy and of their nuns and their monks. So they're people that were dedicated to so-called celibacy, which, you know, it was full of homosexuality and lesbianism, as we all know, and trysts between priests and nuns. Anybody can study that within Romanism. And it's tried to come over and infect us all the time. All the time. 1/3 of them were lost in those early decades of the Reformation from 1517. So it's very important what Martin Luther did. By the 500th anniversary of that, really by the 490th anniversary, it had started to lose steam. Even the Lutheran Church signed documents of understanding with Rome that they were not any longer disagreed on their foundational doctrines. That was in 2007. I attended some of those meetings because there were big parties. It was pretty gross at the time. Today's Martin Luther Day. And so there's also a history of making our grievances against established religious orders known on this day. And it's a tradition that we have to continue. So I really wanted to begin this video before the clock ticked over and we got on to another day. Logan wants to say hi. Hi, Logan. Hello. Who's a snuggle bear, huh? Logan there? Yeah, you know, right back there. He's sleepy. It's past his bedtime. All right. The Bicklery. Mike Bickle used to be so sensitive to the things of God. He was not stiff-necked years ago. He was not self-righteous years ago. In all of my time, I never felt like there was a banging revival at the Hop. I mean, from the time I went into missions in the late 90s, and then the Lord brought me to Tulsa to watch all of the Christian movements and observe them all just burn down to ashes. And finally, in the wisdom of God, I connected with Clay Sonmore about 2008, and he started to teach me that this whole thing was a wrong turn. This whole thing was a wrong turn, that there were progressive compromises that led up to the church being powerless. And you know what? The prayer movement was almost escaped out of that. Some little factions of it did. They made their way out. They broke into power in the Holy Ghost. You know, a lot of people did get healed around these meetings. Let's talk about the accusations. Just let's get that out there. First of all, I'm sure you've read the articles that there are credible accusations. It's not just one witness. This is not just one person. It's not, you know, you're not supposed to entertain an accusation against an elder except upon 2 or 3 witnesses. And so that threshold, it has been passed. And the accusation is that Mike Bickle committed adultery with multiple women that were high up in the ministry. All right, so that's out there, and he's not going to preach from the platform anymore. You know, the leaders all came out and made a statement, etc., about how everybody should feel or not feel, or have discussions or not have discussions. And there's some gerrymandering back and forth. What I really want to point out is that they all did the same thing in 2012 when there was another scandal. And it was a murder scandal, a suicide or a murder with a bunch of sex trysts. And this was after the father of the whole movement and I came in and investigated. You know, okay, so here's Dennis and I sitting on the hood. You know, about that time, we were passing through Kansas City, as we often did in our travels, and he wanted to stop into the prayer house for both those reasons, because he liked to see anything that he had begun and sowed the seeds for and was the grandfather of, to continue to function, and because he wanted to pray. So we stopped in there, and it was night one time, and I was driving, and I said, I'm going to just nap here in the driver's seat. You go on and pray. I'm just going to nap for a little bit, and then we'll go on when you're ready. So he went inside. All right, half an hour later, I couldn't sleep, even though it was the middle of the night. So I went in to the hop, and the first stop I made was the men's room. I went in the men's room. Now, this is not somebody else, right? This is not some woman. This is not some anonymous accuser. This is me talking to you. I walked in the bathroom, and there were probably 5 or 6 of these skinny teenage Harry Potter types hanging around in the bathroom. Obviously, there was, the gaydar goes off. Now, that shouldn't be in the church bathroom, right? But sure enough, these guys were in there fooling around. And here I walk in, and they're going to make a play at me. And so, you know, how those types of things are made with winks and nods and stuff like that. But I made a point to rebuff it. I looked them in the eyes in the mirror, and I narrowed my eyes so that they understood that I was ready to thump all 5 of their skulls. And I wouldn't have broke a sweat doing it either, as an experienced black belt. And as skinny as these guys were, I'd have broke all their bones just in moments. And I looked the one kid in the eye who was the ringleader, and I said, I'm in here strictly for business. And I used the restroom, and I washed my hands. And all of them just kind of stood against the walls. But it had already gotten very, very, very creepy by that time. So remember, this is 13 or 14 years ago from this point in 2023. All right? It's 2009 or 2010. So I'm kind of shocked by this experience. I went in the prayer room, and Dennis was a little distraught. Yeah, subject I'm going to be talking about soon is God TV. And not that anybody who's gotten photographed by God TV is a bad guy, but God TV as an organization is absolutely a lamprey. It is parasitic, and it gobbles up the anointing, and it causes works to die. It causes Christian works to die. It is vampiristic. And Dennis told Mike Bickle and all of the leaders when God TV came in, he said, it's going to be the end of the anointing here if you let God TV in. Pretty soon, they had everything set up, all the cameras going. They had their little trailer with their satellite uplinks. You know, we didn't have the internet like we have today. where you could just YouTube anything or live stream anything. They had to set up some serious equipment to do that in the early 2000s. And immediately the anointing began to wane. So I went in the prayer room. Dennis was in there. He was a little distraught. And we weren't in there very long. He said, let's go. Let's just go. So we leave. And the first thing he tells me is that he went in the bathroom and got hit on. Yeah. Then he's kind of with his equilibrium disrupted from that, goes into the prayer hall, and the ushers start pushing him forward. Hey, could you please sit over here? And he said, well, I want to sit over here. I want to be here. I'm going to pray over in this corner. And they said, well, we just like you to be up front. And he actually confronted these people and said, you know, you got a bunch of guys in the bathroom that are hitting on other guys, including me, when I'm coming here to pray. And I didn't start this yesterday. So there's this issue of dumb dogs, which is an implication, an accusation that the Word of God makes of preachers when they go south, that they're dumb dogs, they don't know how to bark. You know how to bark, don't you? Yes, you do. He's a good boy. He's a good sheepdog. Logan is. He got in a terrible fight today. He's a little tired. So there's a lot of dogs that won't bark. There's a lot of preachers that won't fight for the sheep. It's a problem. That was the beginning of sorrows. And I'll just go ahead and throw out the elephant on the room. Mike Bickle has for many years been strangely possessive of Misty Edwards. I would be shocked if she is not among the Jane Does. And anyone who's hung out around the hop knows that and has to wonder about that. Now, for a pastor to be an authority figure and a pastoral figure for a single woman is really proper, but when things go off the rails, that's the first place that it gets weird, is with them and with the secretaries. Sad to say. After all of that had become established, there was another lady, a very beautiful lady in her early 40s, and someone very experienced in ministry, and I wouldn't want for any malignance to come on her, so I'm not going to name her, but she came from another ministry and started hanging out there and just got sucked in. The gravity just pulled her in, and a lot of it was Mike Bickle's magnetism. And he didn't need to do that to people. The hop had a certain effect on teeny boppers and college students. It had another effect on people that were a little established in life, that were on into their 30s or beyond in their 40s or 50s. And a lot of them got into the cottage industry of buying homes and renting them out and getting into the IHOP network. It was its own whole culture, and a strange culture at that. And once again, the twinkle-toedness was just everywhere. It was just everywhere. Of course, I knew that from going to another Christian university a long time before, that spirit got in and would cause chaos if it was allowed. So I said to this gal who came from another very famous ministry in California, last civil words we ever had, and I'm sad about that, but I had one more chance to pull her out. And I looked her in the eyes and I said, you have found the perfect lost cause for your missionary martyr mentality. That's what I told her. You found the perfect lost cause for your missionary martyr mentality. Because she was determined to hang out at the hop. She was pulled in by Mike Bickle's magnetism. And if she stayed, she would not resurrect the thing. And she felt a strange duty to go down with the ship. It was really sad. Because this is a soldier that was capable on the Lord's battlefield, that was taken off of it. And this is what the hop sadly did for so many years, was pulled people in and just kept them. And it's not the only one. It's not the only one. Okay, so more personal experiences in a little while. And how did it all go wrong? By 2009, the place was crawling with Jesuits. And if you've read any Alberto comics, Alberto tells in Volume 1 how he was issued sex kittens. So they were crawling through the wood pile. I think Alberto says that 34 different people were destroyed by his one Manchurian programmed sex kitten, where he would just give her the signal, like what guy to put the bite on. She'd sidle up to him, seduce him, whatever. A lot of them preachers, and then then they could be blackmailed. They could be there were a lot of options for him as a young Jesuit to destroy the ministry after he got his little kitten in there to do her job. And they operate in the miraculous. They have very glamorous, very seductive. All that was going on in 2009. And the witches, thick. Real practicing covens. And they come and they hang out in places like that. Just to wreck it. Just to get it to this place. Well, they kind of wanted to get it. The whole reason that the scandal I'm going to tell you about in 2012 was pushed under the rug was because the thing was a cash cow. It was just a money machine. The money was coming. The malfeasance, the misguidance, and the homosexual heyday was just too good to be true for the wicked. They were just, like a pig in shit. That's what it was like. Watch, I'll have 1 or 2 live viewers click off now that I said that. All these links are in the description box. So I'm going to tell you about the scandal, okay? And if I had not personally warned everybody, the leaders, up till Mike Bickle, because he would run from Dennis and he would run from me. When Clay said, tell him to shut it down, Dennis said, he won't meet with me. He sees me and he's like gone. He evaporates. He blends into the wallpaper. He's out the back door so fast. Brother Clay really wanted us to, but he knew what we would tell him, that the thing was off the rails. Because he knew what he was doing, see? He knew what he was doing back then. I have no reason to disbelieve any of the accusers, because I saw with my own eyes the fruit, the twisted fruit of exactly what the accusations say. My only surprise is that there's not boys involved. And in the end, there may be. We'll see. We'll see. Because this was off the rails for a lot of years. So after, not before, after, Dennis and I had warned everybody and noised abroad that, look, this thing's going off the rails. You got to stop this. There's rampant fornication. It's everywhere. All your students are all shagging one another. And that's antithetical to Christianity. And aside from that, there's Satanism and some sexual deviance beyond fornication and adultery. And nobody wanted to hear that. Nobody wanted to hear that. And then this happened. I'm going to read you the headline. CBS News. Bethany Deaton death. Micah Moore's prayer group murder confession. All right. Rolling Stone did an article on this, where Micah Moore, who confessed to murdering Bethany, said that he had dropped acid. It details them all being Harry Potterites, like dedicated Harry Potterites. They came out of that generation. All the men in the house, in their prayer group, that a lot of them moved up together from Texas to follow Bethany's husband, Tyler Deaton. Tyler Deaton, who was supposed to be this Charlie Manson type. He was supposed to be this magnanimous, ingenious leader. I would challenge you to look at him on some of these tapes. The dude is twisted, and he's a wuss, and he acknowledges being gay the whole time. In fact, that's like his defense out of why he never consummated his relationship, his marriage with Bethany, with 2 months married before her death, because he was gay the whole time. So see, he's reached out to the world to support him because the issue was always that he was gay, and he tried to hang out with all these Christians. Just look at him. Look at his mannerisms. Look at his shifty eyes. It is manic. It's like watching Charlie Manson. If you just cover up the tattoo of the swastika on Charlie Manson's forehead, it looks just like Tyler. One of the links in the description box is the CBS special. I just watched it. It's an hour long. It's called Fall from Grace. And it is about this prayer group, how the thing was crooked as a dog's hind leg, how Bethany was a nice girl who grew up in homeschool, went off to college and got involved in this prayer group, and then Tyler was this illustrious leader. Their relationship was on again, off again for a long time. He was just so gay that he wouldn't really make a pass at her until they were all in Kansas City. They had a women's house and a men's house that were 4 miles apart in Independence, which is east and north of Grandview, where the Hop is located on Red Bridge Road. And then, they have their big mega campus and all of that. Anyway, Bethany was such a nice girl and really raised to be a Christian, but she was under the magic of this guy. She loved this guy. Her maiden name is Leidlein, Leidlein. One of the things that came out in numerous witness testimony and these articles is that all of the men in the men's house were all having sex with one another on one or another level. And that Tyler was the ringleader of all that. And that, read the Rolling Stone article. Now, Rolling Stone likes to make fun of Christians, okay? They just love it. They love to make fun of conservatism, even if it's not Christian. They love to make fun of our historic and noble form of government in the United States, just because there's communists in there that tear it down. But there's so many unique facts in that article about them all being freaks of Harry Potter, about Michael Moore doing LSD, and about the vast spread of their homosexual relationships, and that Tyler was in on all of this, that he was the one that groomed people, that chose the men that would come in, that he groomed them. And that's the term that they use, that he groomed them. Okay, so finally, Tyler makes his pass at Bethany, takes her out for a walk or whatever, and he says, that he really wants to marry her, and that, so they go into this 2.5 year courtship. 2.5 years. Yeah. And sometimes people do that if they're in college or something. Now, all these people were students at IHOP. When Bethany died, which, by the way, was on October 30 of 2012. And then there's another article when the charges were dropped against Michael Moore was on October 30 of 2014. 2 years later, they dropped the murder charge against the guy who confessed. Now, I'm just gonna weigh in on this, and this is why I'm in Mexico, okay? So I can tell you the whole truth. There's a vast conspiracy because the homosexual underworld of Kansas City had swallowed the hop. And so this goes through all the police departments. It goes through all the government bureaus. It goes through the coroner's office. The coroner's office is one of the first things that the devil worshippers move into control in any town, because then they can cover up sacrifices or anything that they want. And you know what? There was like zero functional forensics in this case. There was nothing at all found. You know, one thing that was never found, I just want to bring you to one clear point. By Bethany's notes, she was a virgin when she died. By the confession of Michael Moore, he had roofied, drugged Bethany and had sexual intercourse with her multiple times, as had a bunch of the other guys in the house. Because when she married Tyler, she moved into his basement apartment in the men's house. And you know what Tyler did? He assigned Bethany to counseling in the mornings with Michael Moore. So she's supposed to get out of bed with her husband, go meet with this other guy, and tell him her most heartfelt secrets. And Michael Moore was one of the manliest guys. He actually had girlfriends. His confession stated that Tyler put him up to murdering Bethany because he had it in him to do it, because he was a little bit of a fighter, right? He later recanted that. What was interesting was all the people in the house, all the men that had been under the tutelage of, under the influence of Tyler, said that was a phrase that he had used with every one of them. You've got it in you to do this. You've got it in you to do this. When he wanted to challenge people and provoke them to do something, that was something that he would commonly say. So it was very believable for Michael Moore to write that in his confession, or to state that in his confession, which was part of the court documents. And it's been printed different places. That's not linked in these descriptions, but it's there. So, when this happened, and he confessed, I made some calls. And I said, hey, I told you there were satanic, sacrificing, witchcraft cults entrenched into the hop. Entrenched into it. And everybody said, oh, yeah. After this happened, you know how Michael Moore came to confess? He confessed to the elders at the hop, which I'm just going to suppose are some of the same ones that were on the stage Sunday to deal with the present scandal of somebody else, of their high hooba and their grand poobah, sleeping around with different women and controlling them. Golly. A lot of people got a serious problem with the fact that there's a girl I like. They want to act like I'm a weirdo for liking a girl. And all of this craziness is right under the surface. So I'm going to tell you that this happened, that I believe Michael Moore's confession, that all the guys in the house were having sex with Bethany. And just to bring my thought to a close, the coroner's report does not state whether or not Bethany had been sexually active. Her honeymoon in Costa Rica was 3 weeks. She was only married 8 weeks before she died. That's a 5-week period where she allegedly was assaulted all these multiple times by multiple men. And may have been suicidal because of that. That's the story. Okay. Missouri religious group investigated in slaying of Bethany Deaton, November 14th, 2012. So this is 5 days after the confession. The investigations start to happen. Their community, the Tyler's community, Tyler Deaton's prayer group, was 20 people to 25 people at one time. And you know what the HOP did? Just crawfished away from it. They made a public statement that he ran this independently, that they didn't know about it. Listen, read these articles. The IHOP leadership told him, hey, you're being too hard on this guy. Which is Harrison, the guy that is the main source for the Rolling Stone article. A fourth man in the house, this is reading from abcnews.go.com. A fourth said he felt groomed to fit into the group of men, and that Tyler Deaton had once gotten into bed with him and held him. He stated that he realized now that Tyler was attempting to make him a member of their sexual group, the detective's report said. Another roommate said Tyler Deaton had told him that the sexual activity was, quote, was part of a religious experience, end quote, according to the report. So you read these articles, you know, they're critical that there should be any discipline, that there should be any admonition. That's not really the way that it should be. But this group was nutty as can be. And I would say that this was typical of what was beginning at the HOP at that time. 5 years earlier, there was no cohabitation. And the whole idea of separating men and women, guys and girls, is to keep natural desires under control. When the devil comes in with twisted desires, you know, as a lady preacher, a black lady preacher who was very wealthy and had done a lot of things for the gospel, asked me to drive her out to a property and look at this property with her. And she had built a number of orphanages and boys' homes. And we were out on this property, and she was in her 60s, and I was just standing here looking at the property, and I said, oh, look at that. You've got a building over here and a building over there. I said, you could have boys in that building and girls in that building. And that woman looked at me. She looked at me like, are you crazy? And she said, this is what she said. She said, girls? Heavens no. Heavens no. And I looked at her like, this is the way that things have always been done, is you put the boys one place and the girls one place, you know. This is how naive I was as a young preacher, right? She said, girls, heavens no. You have enough problems just with homosexual boys. And this is a woman who's built orphanages in different countries and in the USA. And I was just stunned. I never would have got a clue if it wasn't for a few people like that lady elder, you know, taking me by the hand, saying, Sam, this is the deal. This is the deal. You have enough problems just with homosexual boys. Well, this is what started happening at the HOP. Just 5 years before all this broke out, it was a whole different place. It was a whole different place. Religious machinery comes in and starts to take things over. It's how it works. It's how the devil works. And sadly, we very often have to start all over in another place. Attorneys, exorcism led to murder confession, but it was suicide. So you see, these members of the prayer group, of Tyler's prayer group, went to the IHOP leadership after Bethany had been dead for a week. And because of Bethany's death, and it was ruled a suicide right off the bat, because of her death, a lot of heat was coming on IHOP. Remember, the local news carried all these stories, Kansas City Star and all of that. So it was in their meeting of the men of the prayer group with the IHOP leaders that Michael Moore confessed. And when he confessed to the leaders that he murdered Bethany. And then he asked them to drive him to the police station. What's interesting is none of the leaders are named in these articles, but I'll bet you one or more of them was the same ones on the platform Sunday. An IHOP leader and 2 workers from their prayer ministry, their special team, their special exorcism or, deliverance team. I believe in all those things, so I don't want to make fun of the idea. They drove Michael Moore to the police station where he confessed to murdering Bethany. Okay. After turning himself into police on November 9th, 2012, Moore told investigators Tyler Deaton had ordered him to kill Bethany to keep her from revealing the group's secrets, including that Tyler Deaton was having sexual relations with male group members. But Moore's attorneys argue the confession should be thrown out. They say it isn't legitimate because it came only after an evening prayer service in which exorcisms were performed. And then they kind of make fun of the idea that there would be a deliverance service. All right. If you want to know what's going on at the Hop, it's the same thing that was going on in 2012. You can just take a look for yourself. Because there are real revivals going on, and I'm not going to name any of that, it's in a dangerous place where it could really go worldwide. And we're keeping that in prayer, even though I've published some of it. We'd like to see some real revival. I'm a revivalist. I got a message that there was a whole lot of shaking in Kansas City, and I thought, only if they're all shaking one another's wangers, because that's what was going on back then. And these kinds of things don't get better, they get worse. This is why the Bible tells us to purge out the old leaven and to separate ourselves. Well, that's exactly what's going on. And I'm sad about it. I'm sure Brother Dennis is really sad about it because every iteration down this path has just been heartbreaking for him. Like watching your own kid stumble and fall. It was great at one time. Please check out these articles. Watch the CBS documentary, Fall from Grace. The link's in the description. Read the articles, read the Rolling Stone article even, because it tells a lot about what everybody was really into. It was a deeper dive. They followed some of these people home whose names are all redacted, except for a very few ones. You know, Michael Moore, the one that confessed, and Harrison, that was so mistreated by this group and was the main source for the Rolling Stone article. Does anybody have any questions while I'm on here? We've got some people on here live. I'm sure that you all were influenced by the hop. Go ahead and type it in, and I'll try to address that. I certainly don't know everything about what was going on there, but I did observe a lot of things, and on assignment from the Lord. On assignment from the Lord. Tell you a little secret. The guy that's running the revival this time around was discipled by David Hogan. He was discipled in the jungles of Mexico. He left all that religious machinery behind and was discipled by a guy that was the real deal, that lived or died by his faith. You know, he did not get a job at Starbucks or at Higher Grounds and rent an apartment from somebody who should have been bestowing spiritual blessings on that generation as elders, and instead were just milking it for all it was worth so that they could financially build their stake and build their own little sector of the empire. That was its own disgusting thing that was part of this movement, and the brakes should have been put on that immediately. Should have been put on that immediately. Any questions? I'm here. Missouri. Bethany was found in the back seat of her van out at Longview Lake, which everybody that hangs out around Grandview knows where Longview Lake is, with a bag over her head and an empty 100-count bottle of Tylenol PM. And none of these articles have an adequate toxicology report. They're all inadequate and redacted reports. Was that even in her system? How did it get in her system? How long had it been in her system? I'm telling you, there was an elaborate cover-up because the devil wanted this runaway train to keep on going so that it could destroy even more people. Hey, if somebody really wants to know, reach out to me on gospelgunslingers.com. I'm easy to find. There's a contact box there. You can reach out to me on Telegram. You can find me on Twitter. Of course, here we are on YouTube. I'm looking forward to making some friends. Hey, somebody said something. Put my glasses on here. Oh. The merger of the sheriff's office with coroner's office allows crimes. If my assertion that there's a vast cover-up is outlandish for you, consider this. Consider this. That Bethany's family sued the Independence Sheriff's Office for the evidence in her case. Can you believe that? They had to sue, and I don't know whether they ever even got it. Bethany's mother is 100% convinced that she was murdered. 27 years old. There is one more thing that I would like to tell you about the whole pedophile world order. And I'm sure that if you're watching this, you're a little concerned about global war breaking out and threatening to consume the world. Listen, this pedophile world order has gone on for decades. People my age and younger, our whole life has been ruled by corruption. And it has to be swept away. Just like the hop should have been shut down a dozen years ago if anybody had any fear of God. Well, now, finally, the disillusionment is setting in. We'll see how far it goes. It's been corrupt for a long time. All right, guys. God bless. Keep in touch. I'd like to know you if you're out there. Yeah, Sean, there's a lot of kookiness going on. Good night, everybody.